I want to see you. I want to see you. To see you high. Ah! Ah! Okay. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love. Sing holy, 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 holy. holy, 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 I want to see you. Holy, 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 holy. Holy, 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 I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart, I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you, to see you, how you did us, shining the light of your glory. Pour out your power and light as we sing holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Oh no. Oh no.
An execution measure indicates whether you did the things you said were most important to achieving your goals. Keep in mind that you started with a vision, a compelling vision of the future that is bigger than the present. Then, you established a set of 12-week goals that are aligned with that vision. For each goal, you developed actions or tactics that describe the steps that you must take to achieve your goals. The element you have the most direct control over is the execution of your tactics. Knowing to what degree you followed through on those tactics is the execution measure. Because your 12-week goals were established in light of your longer-term vision, the execution measure also represents progress toward your vision. Having a way to measure your execution is critical because it allows you to pinpoint breakdowns and respond quickly. Unlike results, which can lag weeks, months, and in some cases, years behind your actions, an execution measure provides more immediate feedback, which allows you to make game time adjustments much faster. An execution measure is important for another reason as well. If you are not hitting your goal, you need to know whether it is due to a flaw in plan content or in execution, because there's a big difference in how to handle these two breakdowns. A breakdown in plan content occurs when strategies and tactics are not effective, while a breakdown in execution occurs when you fail to fully implement the planned tactics. More than 60% of the time, the breakdown occurs in the execution process, but usually people assume that the plan is at fault and change it. This is a mistake because you don't know if the plan doesn't work if you're not working the plan. Effective measurement will help you pinpoint the source of the breakdown so that you can address it head on. In most cases, unless you are executing at a reasonably high level, there's no need to change or adjust your plan. The great thing is that every time you execute, you get feedback. If your actions don't produce what you expected, you can make the necessary adjustments to your plan based on market feedback. But first, you must execute the plan. Too often, people want to change the plan before they've really executed it. As a general rule, you should rarely change the plan unless you've been effectively completing your planned tactics and it is still not producing. You could have created an awesome plan, but you'll never know unless you actually implement it. However, if you are executing at a high level, and the results you want are not coming, then it's time to go back and adjust the plan. Physics tells us that for every action, there is a reaction. So the good news is that every time you execute, you produce something. It may not be what you expected, but something will happen. This something is market feedback, and it's impossible to effectively adjust your plan without it. Without knowing what tactics you executed, any changes you make will be based purely on guesswork. Truth is the only safe ground to stand on. Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Weekly scorecard. The best way to measure your execution is to work from a weekly plan based upon your 12-week plan and evaluate the percentage of tactics completed.
Yes!
For the 12-week year, we've developed a tool called the Weekly Scorecard. If you've followed the process thus far, you understand that the weekly plan represents the critical activities that you need to accomplish each week to achieve your overall goals. The weekly scorecard then provides an objective measure of how well you executed your weekly plan. With the weekly scorecard, you measure execution, not results. You score yourself on the percentage of activities you complete each week. We urge you to strive for excellence, not perfection. We have found that if you successfully complete 85% of the activities in your weekly plan, then you will most likely achieve your objectives. Remember that your plan contains the top priorities that will add the most value and have the greatest impact. In other words, you only need to be 85% effective on the top priorities to achieve excellence. A word of caution. Scorekeeping is not for the faint of heart. There will be times when you don't execute well and score poorly. People often drop out when they reach this point because they lack the courage to face the reality of their actions. Instead of scoring their performance, they distract themselves with other things that seem important in the moment. With the 12-week year, there is nowhere to hide. It shines a light on where you are performing and where you are not. All of us, from time to time, will struggle to execute. The 12-week year system forces you to confront your lack of execution, and it's uncomfortable, but it is the very thing that is required if you're going to perform at your best. We call this discomfort productive tension. Productive tension is the uncomfortable feeling you get when you're not doing the things that you know you need to do. Our natural inclination when confronted with discomfort is to resolve it. In an effort to do this, people generally go one of two ways. The easy way out is to simply stop using the system and turn off the light that is shining on your performance. Typically, this takes the form of passive resistance, and you put off scoring your week and tell yourself that you'll get to it later, but later never comes. The other way is to use productive tension as a catalyst for change. Instead of responding to the discomfort by bailing out, high achievers use the tension as an impetus to move forward. If you decide that quitting is not an option, then the discomfort of productive tension will eventually compel you to take action on your tactics. This encourages you to move forward by executing your plan. Even with a weekly score of 65 to 70%, you will do well if you stay in the game. You won't accomplish what you are capable of, but you will do well. It's important to remember that the process is not about being perfect, but rather about getting better and better. Measurement drives the process. Effective scorekeeping is essential if you want to execute well and perform at your best. Take time to establish a set of key measures that include lead and lag indicators, and most importantly, be sure to score your execution. Have the courage to measure your performance. Chapter 7. Intentionality. Everything you want to accomplish in life requires an investment of your time. So when you want to improve your results, you must face the fact that your supply of time is completely inelastic and perishable. Even in this era of rapid innovation and technological advancement, time more than any other resource, still limits our results. When we ask our clients what keeps them from achieving more, most often we hear that it's a lack of time, and yet time is the most squandered of all personal resources. A study conducted a few years ago by Salary.com found that the average person wastes nearly 2 hours of every working day. The importance of yes and no. The reality is that if you are not purposeful about how you spend your time, then you leave your results to chance. While it's true that we control our actions and not our outcomes, our results are created by our actions. It stands to reason that the actions we choose to take throughout our day ultimately determine our destiny. In spite of the priceless value of time, many people engage each day on its own terms. In other words, they satisfy the various demands of the day as they are presented, spending whatever time is needed to respond without giving much thought as to the relative value of the activity. This is a reactive approach. The day is controlling you and prevents you from performing at your best. To realize your potential, you must learn to be more mindful about how you spend your time. Living with clear intention goes against the powerful natural tendency to be reactive because it requires you to organize your life around your priorities and consciously choose those activities that align with your goals and vision. When you spend your time with intention, you know when to say yes and when to say no. You are probably aware when you are procrastinating or engaging in low-level activity to avoid tackling a less comfortable high-payoff activity. When you use your time intentionally, you waste less of it and spend more of it on your high-value actions. But to do this, you must be willing to be disciplined and structure your days and weeks. The best way to do this is to use your 12-week plan to drive your activity, so that in the end, you set your goals for the day instead of letting the day direct you. Intentionality is your secret weapon in your war on mediocrity. It's not enough to be busy. So are the ants. The question is, what are we busy about? Henry David Thoreau. Blocking your time. Benjamin Franklin said, if we take care of the minutes, the years will take care of themselves. That is wise counsel. The challenge in applying this wisdom is that throughout the day, things come up. Things that you didn't anticipate that will eat up your valuable minutes. Trying to reduce these interruptions usually doesn't work well, and it can be more difficult than just dealing with them. In our opinion, the key to successful time use, intentional time use, is not trying to eliminate these unplanned interruptions, but instead to block out regular time each week dedicated to your strategically important tasks. We call this performance time, and find that it is the best approach to effectively allocating time that we have ever encountered. It utilizes a simple time-blocking system to regain control of your day and maximize your effectiveness. There are 3 primary components of performance time: strategic blocks, buffer blocks, and breakout blocks. Strategic blocks. A strategic block is a 3-hour block of uninterrupted time that is scheduled into each week. During this block, you accept no phone calls, no faxes, no emails, no visitors, no anything. Instead, you focus all your energy on your pre-planned tasks, your strategic and money-making activities. Strategic blocks concentrate your intellect and creativity to produce breakthrough results. You will likely be astounded by the quantity and quality of the work you produce. For most people, 1 strategic block per week is sufficient. Buffer blocks. Buffer blocks are designed to deal with all of the unplanned and low-value activities, like most email and voicemail, that arise throughout a typical day. Almost nothing is more unproductive and frustrating than dealing with constant interruptions, Yet we've all had days when unplanned items dominated our time. For some, one 30-minute buffer block a day is sufficient, while for others, 2 separate 1-hour blocks may be necessary. The power of buffer blocks comes from grouping together activities that tend to be unproductive so that you can increase your efficiency in dealing with them and take greater control over the rest of your day. Breakout blocks. One of the key factors contributing to performance plateaus is the absence of free time. Very often, entrepreneurs and professionals get caught up in working longer and harder, but this approach kills your energy and enthusiasm. To achieve greater results, what's often necessary is not actually working more hours, but rather taking some time away from work. It's not by chance that people often quote the famous proverb, all work and play make a dull boy. When we don't take time off from work, we can lose our creative edge. An effective breakout block is at least 3 hours long and spent on things other than work. It is time scheduled away from your business during normal business hours that you will use to refresh and reinvigorate your mind, so that when you return to work, you can engage with more focus and energy. If you are not in control of your time, you are not in control of your results. Performance time applies to more than just strategic, buffer, and breakout blocks. The more you can create routine in your days and weeks, the more effective your execution will be. The best way to accomplish this is to create a picture of an ideal week. The concept of an ideal week is to plan on paper all the critical tasks that occur in a typical week and organize them so you can be most productive. If you can't fit all the things you do on paper, there's no way you'll get them done in reality, so the exercise of strategically planning your week will cause you to make some hard choices about how you use your time. As you create your ideal week, it helps to schedule routine tasks at the same time, on the same day each week if possible. Consider when you tend to be at your best. Are you a morning person, or are you better in the afternoon or evening? Schedule your most important activities during your prime time. We will walk you through how to create your model week in Chapter 17. For many of our clients, performance time has had an immediate impact on results. Just gaining control over a few hours each week often has a dramatic effect. Learn to use your time with greater intention, and you will not only be more effective, but you will also feel a greater sense of control, less stress, and increased confidence. Chapter 8. Accountability as ownership. Accountability is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in business and life. Most people equate it with bad behavior, poor performance, and negative consequences. As an example, when an athlete does something in violation of the league's conduct policy, the commissioner will state publicly that the league will hold this athlete accountable and then issues a fine or suspension. It's no wonder that most people want nothing to do with accountability. Our last free act, after which no further free acts are possible, is to deny that we are free. Peter Kestenbaum. People often talk about holding others accountable, especially in business situations. Often, you'll hear management say something like, "We need to do a better job of holding people accountable." I've even heard individuals who truly desire to perform better say, "I just need someone to hold me accountable." These types of statements reflect the mistaken notion that accountability is something that can and must be imposed. That's not accountability, that's consequences. In fact, it is impossible to hold someone else accountable. I like to joke that you can hold a baby and you can hold a bag of groceries, but you can't hold someone accountable. Accountability is not consequences, but ownership. It is a character trait, a life stance, a willingness to own your actions and results regardless of the circumstances. In the book Freedom and Accountability at Work, Applying Philosophic Insight to the Real World, the authors Peter Kestenbaum and Peter Block discuss accountability as follows. We have a small way of thinking about accountability. We think that people want to escape from being accountable. We believe that accountability is something that must be imposed. We have to hold people accountable, and we devise reward and punishment schemes to do this. These beliefs are so dominant in our culture that they are difficult to question, yet they are the very beliefs that keep us from experiencing what we long for. The very nature of accountability rests in the understanding that each and every one of us has freedom of choice. It is this freedom of choice that is the foundation of accountability. Accountability is the realization that you always have choice, that, in fact, there are no have-tos in life. Have-tos are those things we hate to do, but do anyway because we have to. The fact is that there are no have-tos. Everything we do in life is a choice. Even in an environment where there are requirements of you, you still have choice. But there is a big difference when you approach something as a choose-to versus a have-to. When something is a have-to, it's a burden, it's cumbersome, and at best, you meet the minimum standards. However, the realization that you ultimately have choice creates a very different scenario. When you choose to do something, you are able to tap your resources and give your best. It is a much more empowering stance. Ultimately, you choose your actions, your results, your consequences. Accountability is not consequences, it's ownership. All of us have a tendency to look outside of ourselves for things to change and improve. We are waiting for the economy to pick up, for the housing market to turn around, or for our company to come up with a new product, more competitive pricing, or better advertising. It's easy to become a victim to outside circumstances, spending time and energy hoping and imagining what our lives would be like if the world around us were different, believing that these are the keys to improving our results. The truth is, you don't control any of these things. The only things you control are your thinking and your actions. But those are enough if, and that's a big if, you are willing to own them. Don't get the wrong impression that somehow accountability, as we've described it here, is passive. It's quite the contrary. True accountability actively confronts the truth. It confronts with freedom of choice and the consequences of those choices. In this way, accountability is extremely empowering, but you must be willing to confront reality and the truth of your situation. How you view accountability and to what degree you embrace it affects everything you do, from your relationships to your ability to execute effectively. When you understand that true accountability is about choice and taking ownership of your choices, everything changes. You move from resistance to empowerment, from limits to possibilities, and from mediocrity to greatness. At the end of the day, the only accountability that truly exists is self-accountability. The only person who can hold you accountable for anything is you. And to be successful, you must develop the mental honesty and courage to own your thinking, actions, and results. Chapter 9. Interest versus commitment. Commitments are a powerful part of the 12-week year. An ability to make and keep commitments improves results, builds trust, and fosters high-performance teams. Yet, many of us avoid making commitments, and worse yet, we often break them when the going gets tough. To be truly great at what we do, we have to become better at keeping our promises. Commitment is an act, not a word. Jean-Paul Sartre. There's an old anecdote about commitments involving a chicken and a pig at breakfast time. The chicken has contributed the egg and is therefore merely interested in the breakfast. The pig, however, contributes the bacon and is thus completely committed. It's a humorous story, but ultimately paints a negative picture of commitment. In reality, kept commitments benefit both parties involved by improving relationships, strengthening integrity, and building self-confidence. Commitments are powerful and oftentimes life-changing. I'm sure you can recall a time when you were determined to accomplish something meaningful and you were willing to do whatever it took to make it happen. One of the most powerful commitments that I have ever made was to my father. It was the summer after my first year of college, and I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. The two of us were working in the garden, talking about my freshman year. It quickly became apparent to me during that conversation that my father and I had different perspectives on the purpose of college. The issue was my grades. I was on the dean's list, but unfortunately for me, the dean kept two lists, and I was on the one for academic probation. My father explained that he was unwilling to continue helping with tuition unless my results improved. I felt terrible and made a commitment that day to my father and myself. I promised him that when I went back to school in the fall, I would get all A's. He challenged me to meet my commitment by adding to the stakes. If I did get all A's, he would give me $500. If I didn't, I would owe him $500. When I went back to school that fall, I pulled out all the stops. I went to class, took notes in lectures, read the text, and did the homework. I also stopped socializing as much as I had during my first year. In the end, I got the grades, straight A's. The $500 is long gone, but that commitment changed my life. I started showing up on the real dean's list, and I never went back. My story is a great example of commitment. Commitment is a personal promise. Keeping your promises to others builds trust and strong relationships, and keeping promises to yourself builds character, esteem, and success. Unless commitment is made, there are only promises and hopes, but no plans. Peter Drucker. A definition of commitment that I like is the state of being bound emotionally or intellectually to a course of action. American Heritage Dictionary, 4th edition. From this perspective, a commitment is a conscious choice to act in order to create a desired result. We all know intuitively that an ability to keep commitments is fundamental to effective execution and high performance. But many of us fall short of our commitments on a regular basis. It seems that when things get difficult, we find reasons why we can't keep our promises and we shift our focus to other activities. Often our interest wanes when things get tough. It is important to understand there is a difference between interest and commitment. When you're interested in doing something, you do it only when circumstances permit. But when you're committed to something, you accept no excuses, only results. When we commit to something, we do things that we would not ordinarily do. The question of if goes away, and the only question you ask is how. Commitment is powerful, but there are times when all of us struggle to commit. Here are the 4 keys to successful commitments. 1. Strong desire. In order to fully commit to something, you need a clear and personally compelling reason. Without a strong desire, you will struggle when the implementation gets difficult. But with a compelling desire, seemingly insurmountable obstacles are seen as challenges to be met. The desired end result needs to be meaningful enough to get you through the hard times and keep you on track. 2. Keystone actions. Once you have an intense desire to accomplish something, then you need to identify the core actions that will produce the results you're after. In today's world, many of us have become spectators rather than participants. We must remember that it's what we do that counts. In most endeavors, there are often many activities that help you accomplish your goal. However, there are usually only a few core activities that account for the majority of the results, and in some cases, there are only 1 or 2 keystone actions that ultimately produce the result. It is critical that you identify these keystones and focus on them. 3. Count the costs. Commitments require sacrifice. In any effort, there are benefits and costs. Too often, we claim to commit to something without considering the costs, the hardships that will have to be overcome to accomplish your desire. Costs can include time, money, risk, uncertainty, loss of comfort, and so on. Identifying the costs before you commit allows you to consciously choose whether you are willing to pay the price of your commitment. When you face any of these costs, it is extremely helpful to recognize that you anticipated them and decided that reaching your goal was worth it. 4. Act on commitments, not feelings. There will be times when you won't feel like doing the critical activities. We've all been there. Getting out of bed at 5:30 a.m. to jog in the winter cold can be daunting, especially when you're in a toasty warm bed. It is during these times that you will need to learn to act on your commitments instead of your feelings. If you don't, you will never build any momentum and will get stuck continually restarting or, as is so often the case, giving up. Learning to do the things you need to do, regardless of how you feel, is a core discipline for success. Many times commitments are made more arduous by the time frame for which they are made. It is difficult to commit to anything for a lifetime. Even keeping a promise for an entire year can be challenging. With the 12-week year, you are not asked to make lifetime or even annual commitments, but rather 12-week commitments. It is much more feasible to establish and keep a commitment for 12 weeks than to keep it for 12 months. At the end of the 12 weeks, you reassess your commitments and begin again. Our commitments ultimately shape our lives. They support sound marriages, create lasting relationships, drive our results, and help build our character. There is just something incredibly empowering about knowing if you say you're going to do something that you can count on yourself, that you don't need to hedge your bets. Chapter 10. Greatness in the Moment. They say that with technology, the world is now smaller. I think it's also moving faster. Life seems to be getting busier and speeding up. Don't get me wrong, technology is great. My phone now has way more computing capability and usefulness than the first laptop I purchased in 1988 for about $6,000. The downside is that we now have very little downtime in our day. It used to be that on the drive to and from work, you could ramp up and ramp down. But now, most people spend that time on the phone. The natural margin in our day is disappearing, but we still need time to mentally relax. In this hurried new world, multitasking has become a highly valued skill. The belief is that in order to get the most out of my day, I need to be fully scheduled, fully committed, and constantly on the run. The fear is that I might miss out on something good, so I hurry from one meeting or event to the next, squeezing in a phone call or two in between. When I'm in meetings, I'm constantly checking my email and messages because I don't want to miss anything. And with texting, I can carry on 2 or 3 conversations at one time. Not many people would admit that this is the way they operate, but just look around you. This is the way most people behave. In our efforts not to miss anything, we unwittingly miss everything. Our attention is spread over various subjects and conversations, and when we strive to do so much, we actually apply very little of ourselves to any individual activity. We feel stressed out, burned out, exhausted, frustrated, and disconnected. In the end, this approach practically guarantees that we will be mediocre by virtue of the fact that nothing gets our full attention, not the important projects, not the important conversations, and not the important people. Most people are running so fast they miss life. They are in one place physically and another place mentally. You are most effective when you are mentally where you are physically, when you are present in the moment. Athletes call it playing in the zone. When you're present in the moment, your thinking is clear and focused, decisions come easily, and you move through tasks almost effortlessly. When you are in the moment, you live with grace and ease. When you are totally present in the moment, when you connect with the now, life is more enjoyable. The best thing about the future is that it comes one day at a time. Abraham Lincoln. You can't change the past or act in the future. The current moment, the eternal right now, is all you have. Right now, you can affect what happens to you for the rest of your life. The future is created now. Our dreams are achieved in the moment. My wife Judy and I are both cancer survivors. For those of you who have dealt with cancer, either yourself or with a family member, you know firsthand how quickly you gain an appreciation for the present moment. The fact is that life happens in the moment. Life is lived in the moment. And ultimately, greatness is created in the moment. Performing in the moment. Like many people around the world, every couple of years I tune in to the Olympic Games to watch amazing athletes do incredible things. A few years back, as I watched the events, the following thought crossed my mind. When does a champion become great? The obvious answer seemed to be when the individual achieves a high level of performance, such as winning a gold medal. But as I considered my own question further, I came to the conclusion that greatness is not achieved when the result is reached, but rather long before that, when an individual chooses to do the things that he knows he needs to do. Let's stick with the Olympic athlete as an example. The athlete becomes great not when she breaks a world record and wins a medal. That's when the world recognizes her. But in reality, the event is just the evidence of her greatness. The athlete achieved greatness months, perhaps years earlier, when she decided to run the extra mile, swim the extra laps, or to perform just one jump more. I would argue that Michael Phelps didn't achieve greatness when he won his 18th gold medal, or when he won his first. He became great when he decided to do the things that would allow him to win. He achieved greatness the moment he chose to put the effort into his training, spending the hours in the gym and pool, and eating the foods his body needed instead of those he wanted, strengthening his mental resolve. The gold medal wins were simply the evidence of his greatness. Michael Phelps had actually achieved greatness many years earlier. Results are not the attainment of greatness, but simply confirmation of it. You become great long before the results show it. It happens in an instant, the moment you choose to do the things you need to do to be great. Let him who would enjoy a great future waste none of his present. Roger Ward Babson. What I find profound is that the difference between greatness and mediocrity on a daily and weekly basis is slim. Yet the difference in results down the road is tremendous. The difference between greatness and mediocrity for a salesperson is 2 or 3 extra appointments a week, 5 or 10 more calls a day, 3 hours out of a 45-hour work week spent working on their business. For a manager or leader, it's recognizing the good work of one more person each day, delegating a task instead of doing it themselves, spending 3 hours of their week on strategic priorities, giving verbal praise and encouragement to someone who's struggling. On a daily and weekly basis, these differences seem minor, but in the long run they are significant. Each and every one of us has the God-given ability to be great. What makes a champion is the discipline to do the extra things, even when, especially when, you don't feel like it. The encouraging news is that regardless of how you've performed in the past or how you are performing currently, you can be great, beginning today, simply by choosing to do the things you know you need to do. It's really no more complicated than that. In the end, you are either great in the moment or not at all. In the first chapter, I wrote about the two lives most of us have, the one we live and the one we are capable of living. Don't settle for anything less than the life you are capable of. Make a commitment to be great each day and watch what can happen in just 12 short weeks. Chapter 11, Intentional Imbalance. The 12-week year is powerful and life-changing. Although the bulk of examples we use in this audiobook address the application of the 12-week year for your business, it applies equally well in all areas of your life. One challenge most of us face is balancing our time and energy between work and family, community service and recreation, exercise and relaxation, personal passions and obligations. Too much time and effort spent in a single area can create burnout and a lack of fulfillment overall. You can start to feel as if one area of your life is draining your energy, stealing your joy, and subverting your real purpose in life. It's no wonder that so many people are seeking ways to regain balance in their lives. The challenge of work-life balance is, without question, one of the most significant struggles faced by modern man. Stephen Covey. If taken literally, the phrase life balance is something of a misnomer. It is natural to think that the goal of life balance is to spend equal time and energy in the various areas of your life. But in reality, it's not practical, and it would not necessarily create the life you desire. Trying to spend equal time in each area is unproductive and often frustrating. Life balance is not about equal time in each area. Life balance is more about intentional imbalance. Life balance is achieved when you are purposeful about how and where you spend your time, energy, and effort. At different times in your life, you will choose to focus on one area over another, and that's perfectly fine, provided it's intentional. Life has different seasons, each with its own set of challenges and blessings. There's no such thing as work-life balance. There are work-life choices, and you make them, and they have consequences. Jack Welch. The 12-week year is a terrific process to help you live a life of intentional imbalance. Many of our clients use the 12-week year to focus on a few key areas in their lives and gain new ground. Think about what could be different for you if every 12 weeks you focused on a few key areas in your life and made significant improvement. Think about your health and fitness. What might be different if for the next 12 weeks you made a commitment to improve in this area? One option is to set out a 12-week goal in this area and build a 12-week plan. In this scenario, you would identify a handful of tactics that you would execute on a daily and weekly basis over the next 12 weeks. Your plan may include tactics like these. Do 20 minutes of cardio 3 times a week. Train with weights 3 times a week. Drink at least 6 glasses of water each day. Limit calorie intake to 1,200 daily. The other option is to again set a 12-week goal, but rather than building a tactical plan, you identify a keystone or core action and commit to completing it for the next 12 weeks. In certain instances, a full plan works best, while in others, a keystone commitment is most productive. What about your relationships, your spouse or significant other, family, and close friends? You can use the 12-week year to build better relationships or create more romance or intimacy with your mate. How might those relationships be different if you committed yourself to making real progress over the next 12 weeks? This can be as simple as making an action commitment, like having one date night or family night a week, and following through for the next 12 weeks. It truly is incredible what you can accomplish in just 12 weeks when you commit to a specific action. Consider other areas like your spiritual, financial, emotional, intellectual, or community life. Maybe it's time to get out of debt or finish that degree you put on hold. Perhaps you've been thinking about writing a book, starting a foundation, or learning a new language. You might not be able to complete goals like these in 12 weeks, but you can sure make significant progress. Breaking your bigger goals into 12-week segments allows you not only to make consistent progress, but also to celebrate the milestones along the way. When you are making real progress, you feel greater satisfaction, feel more fulfilled, and stay motivated to see the project through to completion. To decide what to focus on, start with your vision. Then rate yourself in the 7 areas of life balance. That is, spiritual, spouse, partner, family, community, physical, personal, and business. I like to use a scale from 1 to 10 to rate my level of satisfaction. A score of 10 is the best I can be in an area. In other words, 10 is great by my definition. Conversely, a score of 1 would be terrible by my definition. Notice that I am using my definition of success and satisfaction as the basis for my assessment. If you are single, for example, and you are happy with that, you might score yourself a 10 under the key relationship category. Each of these areas has either a source of energy or a drain of it. Think about it. If your work life is stressful, full of uncertainty, and unfulfilling, it is bound to affect your personal life. However, if your career provides you a nice income and you enjoy what you do, that creates energy and momentum across the other areas and will have a positive effect. The 12-week year has the power to increase your income and material wealth 2, 3, or even 4-fold. It also has the power to help you experience the same magnitude of improvement in any area you choose. Apply the 12-week year to all areas of your life and be prepared for some amazing things to happen. Be encouraged. Part 2. Putting it all together. Part 2 provides additional insights and captures more than a decade of learning about what it takes to apply consistently the fundamentals of execution. We provide proven tools, templates, and tips to help you apply the 12-week year in a powerful way and achieve your goals. A year from now, you'll wish you had started today. Chapter 12, The Execution System. The 12-week year is an execution system that helps you operate at your best each day by creating clarity and focus on what matters most and a sense of urgency to do it now. As a result, more of the important stuff gets done day in and day out. A few days or weeks of that is no big deal, but when you put together day after day after day, week after week after week, the result is like compound interest, and in just 12 weeks you can be in a very different position, both personally and professionally. You may have noticed as you listened to the first section of this audiobook that in addition to restructuring your year into 12 weeks, there are a number of fundamental elements that we have discussed as well. In fact, there are 8 elements that we believe are fundamental to high performance in any endeavor. Those 8 elements are vision, planning, process control, measurement, time use, accountability, commitment, and greatness in the moment. In this section, we've organized these elements into a set of 3 principles and 5 disciplines. We have found that organizing them in this way will help you better understand how they operate as a holistic system, making it easier for you to apply them consistently. One of the challenges with these disciplines and principles is that most people know what they are, but knowing and doing are 2 very different things. As you learn to leverage these more effectively in your business and personal life, you will be amazed at what you can accomplish and how quickly you can do it. 3 principles. The 12-week year builds on a foundation of 3 principles that in the end determine an individual's effectiveness and success. These principles are: 1. accountability. 2, commitment. 3, greatness in the moment. Let's take a closer look at each one. Accountability. Accountability is ultimately ownership. It is a character trait, a life stance, a willingness to own actions and results, regardless of the circumstances. The very nature of accountability rests on the understanding that each and every one of us has freedom of choice. It is this freedom of choice that is the foundation of accountability. The ultimate aim of accountability is to continually ask oneself, what more can I do to get the result? Commitment. Commitment is a personal promise that you make to yourself. Keeping your promises to others builds strong relationships, and keeping promises to yourself builds character, esteem, and success. Commitment and accountability go hand in glove. In a sense, commitment is accountability projected into the future. It is ownership of a future action or result. Building your commitment capacity has a dramatic effect on your personal and business results. The 12-week year helps you build the capacity to follow through on critical commitments and achieve breakthrough results in all areas. Greatness in the moment. As I wrote in Chapter 10, greatness is not achieved when a great result is reached, but long before that, when an individual makes the choice to do what is necessary to become great. The results are not the attainment of greatness, but simply confirmation of it. You become great long before the results show it. It happens in an instant, the moment you choose to do the things you need to do to be great, and each moment that you continue to choose to do those things. These three principles, accountability, commitment, and greatness in the moment, form the foundation of personal and professional success. 5 disciplines. The 12-week year tackles both the way you think and the actions you take. At the action level, it concentrates on building capacity within a set of success disciplines that are required for effective execution. We have found that top performers, whether athletes or business professionals, are great not because their ideas are better, but because their execution disciplines are better. These 5 disciplines are 1. Vision. 2. Planning. 3. Process control. 4. Measurement. 5. Time use. The 12-week year will help you apply these disciplines in a way that leverages your knowledge and skills and fosters consistent action. Vision. A compelling vision creates a clear picture of the future. It is critical that your business vision aligns with and enables your personal vision. This alignment ensures a powerful emotional connection that promotes a sustained commitment and continual action. Planning. An effective plan clarifies and focuses on the top priority initiatives and actions needed to achieve the vision. A good plan is constructed in a manner that facilitates effective implementation. Process control. Process control consists of a set of tools and events that align your daily actions with the critical actions in your plan. These tools and events ensure that more of your time is spent on strategic and money-making activities. Measurement. Measurement drives the process. It is the anchor of reality. Effective measurement combines both lead and lag indicators that provide comprehensive feedback necessary for informed decision-making. Time use. Everything happens in the context of time. If you are not in control of your time, then you are not in control of your results. Using your time with clear intention is a must. It's important that you see the interconnectedness of these 5 disciplines. If you don't have a clear, compelling vision, then the other disciplines really don't matter because you are not living a life by design, but by chance. If you have a vision but no plan, then you have a pipe dream. If you have a vision and a focused plan but lack process control, then you'll have a lot of frustration because some days you will execute and make progress and some days you won't. If you have those disciplines in place but lack the courage to keep score, then there's no way for you to know what's working and what isn't. There is no way for you to make game time adjustments that can accelerate your success. Finally, if all of those are in place, but you are not intentional about what you say yes to and what you say no to, then the day is controlling you. The emotional cycle of change. To apply the 12-week year will require change, and change is uncomfortable. It's helpful to understand the process we go through emotionally when faced with change, so we won't be derailed by it. Whenever we decide to make a change in our lives, we experience an emotional roller coaster. Psychologists Don Kelly and Daryl Conner described this phenomenon in a paper called The Emotional Cycle of Change. Kelly and Conner's Emotional Cycle of Change, ECOC, includes 5 stages of emotional experience, which we will explore here with slight modifications based on our experience. Regardless of the change you choose to make, you will experience this cycle. You can plot new relationships, new purchases, new jobs, and new neighborhoods on the ECOC, and it's always the same. Sometimes the highs are higher, sometimes the lows are lower. Sometimes the cycle is shorter, and other times it's longer. But in all cases, you will experience this cycle when you decide to make a change in your life. There are 5 stages that people move through emotionally when changing their behavior. 1. Uninformed optimism. 2. Informed pessimism. 3. Valley of despair. 4. Informed optimism. 5. Success and fulfillment. The first stage of change is often most exciting, as we imagine all of the benefits and have not yet experienced any of the costs. Our emotions are driven by our uninformed optimism, which is in the positive emotional area. You see all of the benefits of the change and none of the downside, so this stage is fun. You are brainstorming ideas and strategizing how you might create the new level of results that you desire. Unfortunately, uninformed optimism doesn't last long. As you learn more about the reality of what it takes to change, positive emotions can quickly sour. The second stage of change, informed pessimism, is characterized by a shift to a negative emotional state. At this point, the benefits don't seem as real, important, or immediate, and the costs of the change are apparent. You start to question if the change is really worth the effort and begin to look for reasons to abandon the effort. If that's not bad enough, things get worse. I call the third stage the Valley of Despair. This is when most people give up. All of the pain of change is felt, and the benefits seem far away or less important, and there is a fast, easy way to end the discomfort, going back to the way you used to do things. After all, you rationalize that it wasn't so bad before. If you quit on change when you were in the Valley of Despair, you go back to the first stage, uninformed optimism, which is a whole lot more fun than being in the valley. It is precisely at this stage, the Valley of Despair, that having a compelling vision is critical. Nearly all of us have had times in our lives when we wanted something so badly we were willing to pay any price and overcome any hurdle to get it. Maybe it was your first car. Maybe it was getting into that college you always dreamed of attending. Maybe it was pursuing the person whom you wanted to marry. Maybe it was your dream job. Whatever it was, you wanted it so badly that you willingly paid the price of your own comfort to get it. Wanting passionately to reach your vision, combined with commitment and the tools and events of process control, is the way through the valley to the next stage of change. The fourth stage is informed optimism. At this stage, your likelihood of success is much higher. You are back in the positive emotional area of the cycle. benefits of your actions are starting to bear fruit, and the costs of change are lessened because your new thoughts and actions are becoming more routine. The key at this stage is not to stop. Success and fulfillment is the final stage of the ECOC. At this final stage of change, the benefits of your new behaviors are fully experienced, and the costs of change are virtually gone. The actions, which at the beginning were difficult and uncomfortable, have now become routine. Every time you complete the cycle, you build not only your capacity, but also your confidence. At this point, you can move on to the next change that you want to implement with greater assurance of success. The ECOC is the description of the emotional impact of change. By being aware of this cycle, you are less likely to be derailed by negative emotions and are able to manage change more effectively. Closed system. The 12-week year is a closed system in that it contains everything you need to succeed. In our 2-day workshop, we have the participants list everything it takes to excel. Then, we list all of those items on a flip chart. Typically, there are more than 20, and the list fills 1 to 2 large sheets of paper. When we go through each item, every one of them is represented in these disciplines and principles. That is why, if you apply the 12-week year fully as a complete system, you can't help but improve. The challenge is that not everyone applies it as a system. Often, people will apply some of the elements and not apply others. Like any system, the whole is exponentially greater than the sum of the parts. Apply and leverage any one of the disciplines or principles and you will gain from it. But the real breakthrough comes when all of them are applied in their entirety. When applied in this way, the 12-week year becomes a self-correcting system that creates a breadcrumb trail that allows you to pinpoint any breakdowns and take corrective action on a timely basis. It is a deliberate practice system that is designed for continuous improvement. In addition to being a closed system, the 12-week year also facilitates change. When you install the 12-week year as your operating system, it makes subsequent change easier. Let's use a computer as an analogy. You can have the best software money can buy, but if your operating system is not working, those programs are worthless. We've all experienced this from time to time when the printer won't print, the document won't open, or your computer is frozen. When you install the 12-week year as your operating system, it leverages your other business systems. For instance, most companies have systems for marketing, sales, products, service, technology, and other business processes. Without a system for execution, we tend to hang on to our existing systems because that is what is familiar and predictable, especially when we are faced with change. When the 12-week year is your operating system, it supports all your other business systems. So when change comes, and it will, you do not experience a massive upheaval. Instead, you can easily incorporate new systems like plug-and-play software. People need stability. We need some things to remain the same. The 12-week year as an operating system stays the same. It provides a consistent platform to implement corporate initiatives and change efforts without the chaos that usually accompanies change. For an individual, it functions as the daily foundation that doesn't change. The 12-week year is not one more thing you do. It is how you get things done. In the following chapters, we will take a deep dive into the disciplines and principles of the 12-week year. We will provide you with even greater insight, as well as tools and exercises you can use effectively to apply and leverage these fundamentals to achieve more in 12 weeks than most do in 12 months. Chapter 13. Establish your vision. The first step to creating breakthrough with the 12-week year is to craft a great vision for yourself. This should be a fun and inspiring exercise. Vision is critical Because there will be days when you just won't feel like taking action on your plan. To help you stay on track, you will need a powerful reason why, and that's your vision. Sal Durso, a longtime friend and client, has a personal take on the power of vision. We've applied the principles of the 12-week year in our firm for years. It has become second nature to us. It's the way that we get stuff done, and it's the way that we stay on track even when things get in the way. Not long ago, our firm lost a big part of our revenue when a group of our key advisors left and took with them their clients and their revenue. As you would expect, this was an extremely trying time for the firm, and it impacted me both personally and professionally. The people leaving were not just business associates, they were longtime friends as well, and their loss was felt deeply by all of us who remained. I could have put my victim glasses on and placed all of the blame for this loss squarely on those who had left. Okay, looking back, there may have been at least a couple of days that I had a why me attitude, but in the end, my desire and vision to build a business that would survive long past my stewardship took over. It was during this time that I took a much-needed summer trip to the incredible state of Alaska. While there, I intentionally shifted my thinking and reflected on the things that have made my life so incredibly wonderful. A relationship with a God who loves me, a wife and family who any man would be proud of, and a business that is approaching a milestone that few will ever see, 50 years in profitable operation. As a part of the trip to Alaska, we took a fantastic rafting journey down the Kennecott River. As we navigated our way around yet another scenic bend in the river, an incredible sea of purple flowers appeared. The flowers spread across the mountainside as far as the eye could see. Our guide said that this was called fireweed, and just a few years ago this vista had been a charred remnant of a forest fire. When this purple blanket appears, it is the first sign that the forest is regenerating. It filled me with awe and a sense of hope and expectation for the new forest that was to come. Apparently, even nature has a way to create a vision for what is to follow. It occurred to me then that rather than contemplate the charred remains of our loss, we needed to focus on the new signs of rebirth in our business. As leader of the organization, it was clear to me that our firm needed the same vision that I just had, and it was my role to set it. Arriving back in my office excited and refreshed, much of the next few weeks was spent talking with each of our team members, asking them what they felt made our organization unique and what they thought about the future. These discussions and hours of contemplation helped me craft a vision that 1 year later is our fireweed field, the guiding light for our company. A year after our forest fire, the fireweed has emerged, and the young saplings that will make us stronger than ever before are germinating. Our leadership team, advisors, and staff all say that our firm is a better place because of what happened a short year ago. As leader, I know the vision that we are all committed to is the change agent that will shape our organization for years to come. True success will happen when people bound by a common vision work together for a common outcome. More firestorms may come, but our vision and faith will carry us through. Sal saw the power of vision to create movement and progress and took action. Many people miss out on the potential of vision to create the emotional energy needed to inspire positive action, even in an environment of charred earth. Do you have charred earth like Sal had? Or are you doing fine but aspire to greater heights? In both scenarios, a compelling vision is a powerful force to move you forward. The most powerful visions address and align your personal aspirations with your professional dreams. In the end, your professional vision often funds and enables your personal vision. For your vision to help you push through the discomfort of change, you must be clear on what it is you want to create in life. Most people focus primarily on their business or career, but your business is just part of your life, and it is actually your life vision that gives traction and relevance to your business. The best visions are big ones. In our experience, nothing great is ever accomplished without first being preceded by a big vision. All of the great accomplishments of mankind, from medicine to technology to space travel to the World Wide Web, were first envisioned and then created. All of your big personal accomplishments must also be preceded by big visions. So, we challenge you to dream big and imagine true greatness for yourself. Your vision should be big enough that it makes you feel at least a little bit uncomfortable. Impossible, possible, probable, given. Unfortunately, when we imagine a future that is significantly bigger than our current reality, we can begin to think that it is impossible for us. We can see others who have achieved great things, but we start to think that there is no way that we can get there. When you start to envision a significant accomplishment that is well beyond what you've achieved in the past, the question most people immediately ask is, how would I do this? That is the wrong question so early in the process. The fact is, you don't know how to do it because if you did, you would likely be doing it already and living that reality. The fact that you don't know how to do it creates the perception that it is impossible, at least for you, and it makes you think of new goals on a sliding scale of impossibility to certainty. Your ability to do something is malleable in this mindset. The problem is that if you think something is impossible, you will never attain it. Henry Ford said, if you think you can or think you can't, you're right. The first step, then, to reaching your biggest dreams is to shift from impossible thinking to possible thinking. You do this not by asking how, but by asking what if. What would be different for you, your family, your friends, your team, your clients, and your community? By asking what if, you give yourself permission to entertain the possibility and begin to connect with the benefits. As you do this, the desire intensifies and the door on your future cracks open just a fraction.
BestBookBits.com presents Choose Yourself. Be happy, make millions, live the dream by James Altucher. Published in 2013 and weighing 276 pages. New tools and economic forces on earth make wealth with individuals who art, make millions of dollars, and change the world without help. More and more opportunities are rising out of the ashes of the broken system to generate real inward success. Personal happiness, health, and outward success. The fully work hand in glove. This book will teach you to choose yourself. We dive into case studies, interviews, and examples, including author, investor, and entrepreneur James Altucher's own heartbreaking and inspiring story. Choose yourself. Illuminate your personal path to building a bright new world out of the wreckage of your life. The written summary can be found on our website, bestbookbits.com. So without further ado, I'm going to do this on three sentences. The world is changing. No one is someone who is hired to invest in your company, to sign you, to pick you. It's up to you to make the most important decisions in your life. Choose yourself. Your habits supply laying a solid foundation by building physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health.
Oh, can you get Andy's bag from the car for her?
Okay.
Thank you.
In this new era, you have two choices. One, a tech startup, not a horrible choice. Sell those ideas, to execute on them, and to be persistent, so even as we fail, you learn and you move on to the next adventure. don't, they will begin to disappear. There's a saying, the learned man aims for more, the wise man decreases, and then increases again. This is about a new phase in history where art, science, business, and spirit join together for the best in the pursuit of true Rejection and the fear of rejection is the biggest impediment we face to choosing ourselves. What you need to do is build a house you build within. You build the house by laying a solid foundation, by building physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health. The only truly safe to go for, to get rejection, to repeat, to strive, to wish. Without rejection, there is no frontier, there is no passion, and there is no magic. There's a saying, time heals all wounds. This is true, but we control a sensitive and much intelligent minds. When I get on the subway, I might get like to sit and read and daydream until I arrive at my destination. To ask people for their seats went against everything they had been taught. This is obviously an extreme, but it points out how hard it is for us to do things for ourselves unless we are given some implicit permission. Instead of having sheep to get a seat, use all the things you're grateful for, even the negative parts of your life. Figure out why you should be grateful for them. Try to filter out to one. Only think about the people who you enjoy. Only read the books you enjoy that make you happy to be human. Only go to events that actually make you laugh or fall in love. Only deal with the people who love you back. Who are winners and make you a winner too. Every time you say yes to something you do not want to do, you still have you will have less energy for things you're doing a good job on. You will make less money.
You see that one was saving?
Of your life.
I could not even find it.
Slow signal saying we did it. Only your fire to cultivate is the fire inside you. Nothing external will cultivate it. The greater your internal fire is, the more people will want it. Succeed in comedy until his 40s. Ray Kroc was a milkshake salesman in his 50s. Then he stumbled onto a clean restaurant that served a good hamburger run by two brothers with the last name Chandler. He bought McDonald's when he was a kid. Raymond Chandler, the most successful novelist of all time, wrote his first novel at the age of 52. But he was young to get to Frank Ford, who won the Booker Prize first novel, Angela's Ashes, with the Bananas in 1966. Harry Bernstein was a total failure when he wrote his best-selling memoir, Years Before. His prize winning 40 novels had been rejected by public. When the memoir came out, he was 93 years old. A quote from him: "If I had not lived until I was 90, I would not have been able to write this book. God knows what other potential were in the world. If we could only enter my mind where it would be like this." As I write this, I am 25 and I still have no idea what I want to be when I grow up. But I'm starting to finally accept the fact that all I want to be is me. All I want to be is me. No matter how much of the minimalist style you want to take, you are still stuck with all the things in your head without vertical words. The silence is the only place where creative ideas will happen. Only hire someone you wouldn't mind sitting next to you on a highway across the country. Think of two people in your network who don't know each other but you think you have value to each other's lives. Introduce them. Do this every day. Get better and better at it. The more value you bring within Even if it doesn't work with the friend goes you maybe wait, the friend will tell you what to do. And then the friend will tell you don't do it. The only skills that you need to be an entrepreneur are the ability and sometimes you execute and to be persistent, so even as you fail, you learn and move on into the next step. I asked the darkness when I opened my eyes, who is the devil? Simple action and waiting for my action, ready to receive. You don't have to come up with a new thing. Just old things slightly better than everything else. The way to get good ideas is to do two things. Number one, read 2 hours a day. Number two, 1 to 10 ideas a day. 10 ideas a day. By the end of the day, you should read 2,600 to the fact that you can control all the events in your life. Believe to the fact that you can control all the events in your life. You don't wake up and say, I'm going to do everything and make my way. You say, I have people. And a lot of people have the same problem. And those are different self-control step for you. To succeed at something, know every part of the industry, know every pattern, try out all the parts. Understand how products are made, make a product that actually use every single day. You can't sell it if you personally don't know it. If you have something that's worthwhile, you can't influence it. They need you more than you need. If you have an idea, don't focus on money. Don't focus on money. Do this. Build the product, sell it to a customer, start selling, then job. Successful, you need to start success. You need to start success. Don't pay the people who are miserable. If you are envious, then you have distance yourself from success and make it harder to get there. In the past 15 years, the only time I didn't look at my bank account every day was when I was doing something I was passionate about. Ask yourself, what's the lifetime value of the customer? What are the auxiliary benefits of having this customer? Learn the entire history of your audience, your readership, and your platform. Often the real reason someone buys from you is not for your product, but for you. On Richard Branson. The day he came up with the idea, he also called Bowen and got a phone from him. Every day, read or skim chapters from books currently
Atmosphere, with its impassioned support for women's rights and black welfare, must have been highly congenial to the sisters. Among other speakers, they heard inspirational lectures given by Ralph Waldo Emerson, Wendell Phillips, Henry Ward Beecher, and John Brown. A devotee of the Protestant work ethic, SETI even approved of the school's daily regimen, which was minutely budgeted from wake up at 5:30 a.m. until the lights went out at 9:45 p.m. I do not call the rules strict, but am pleased with all of them, she informed her former music teacher. At Oriad, she dropped an occasional friendly note to Rockefeller, though the relationship was at this point less one of romance than of close camaraderie. Over the years, Laura's growing commitment to religion smothered her literary bent, but at Oriad she was a veritable blue-stocking, writing poetry, running the Literary Society, and editing the campus literary magazine. In a revealing article in the Oriad Euphemia, she wrote about 3 aristocracies then ruling America: an aristocracy of intellect in New England, wealth in the mid-Atlantic states, and blood in the South. In view of later events, her descriptions of Boston's intellectual preeminence or of Southern social decadence are less noteworthy than the vitriol she poured on the New York nouveau riche. In this specified portion of our glorious republic, the parvenu lady, with the brain all guiltless of ever having developed an idea, attires herself in habiliments whose caste, not style, would admit of their being worn in the presence of royalty. After lambasting the dominion of the almighty dollar and the mid-Atlantic aristocracy, she concluded mordantly, the gigantic intellect of Boston must bow to Wall Street stocks and bonds. Such Midwestern scorn for Wall Street's moneyed upstarts was certainly consonant with Rockefeller's beliefs. Little did the two know they would one day become synonymous with the almighty dollar and reside in the heart of Manhattan's swankest, most sinful precincts. In the spring of 1859, the Spelman sisters returned to Cleveland and began to take French, Latin, piano, and voice lessons at the Cleveland Institute. That autumn, SETI and Lute, who always moved in tandem, began to teach in the public schools, SETI serving as a teacher and principal's assistant, while Lute taught boys in the same building. Later on, Laura left no doubt of her family's straitened circumstances at the time. I had to do work, which was a good thing, she later told her son. And I loved to do it, which was another good thing. Despite a well-merited reputation as a disciplinarian, she was a popular teacher, and on her last day on the job, all the girls in her class remained after dismissal to say goodbye to her and to cry over losing her, said one pupil. My, how they cried. In the early 1860s, Laura was sufficiently pleased with work that she felt in no special rush to get married. All the while, John Rockefeller, with the dogged patience that would defeat scores of embattled competitors, waited determinedly in the wings. In April 1860, Laura wrote her former music teacher, I seem to have no anxiety about leading a life of single blessedness. But she mentioned Rockefeller and said that the gentleman told me not long ago that he was in no particular rush to have me get married, but he hoped that in the multitude of my thoughts I would not forget the subject. She must have been torn when contemplating a match with Rockefeller, for teachers had to remain single and marriage would end her career. In 1862, Rockefeller, buoyed by his rising wealth in the produce business, began to woo Setty in earnest, often appearing at her school at day's end to take her home. The Spellmans then lived in a lovely area of apple groves and greenery called the Heights, and on weekends John and brother William often rode out there under the guise of watching Civil War recruits drill nearby. After the Spellmans moved to a new home in downtown Cleveland, John, often wearing boots spattered with oil from his new refinery, stopped by and took Setty out for drives in his buckboard, and she heard with delight the details of his business. Her judgment was always better than mine, Rockefeller said. She was a woman of great sagacity. Without her keen advice, I would be a poor man. There was loving exaggeration here, but in the early days of their marriage, she did bring home the books and review them with her. Despite her constant reluctance, Rockefeller pursued her with quiet persistence. In love, as in business, he had a longer time frame, a more settled will than other people. By early 1864, with the first profits rolling in from refining, he had become a substantial person in Cleveland, cutting an impressive figure in his frock coat, silk hat, and striped trousers. He was a handsome young man with a fine straight nose, rather humorless mouth, and vaguely mournful visage. His mustache flowed into fluffy side whiskers, but his hair was already receding at the temples. His eyes were steady and lucid, as if confidently scanning the horizon for business opportunities. Later on, Rockefeller was peculiarly reluctant to divulge to his children details of his courtship, referring to the delicacy of the situation. One gathers that another man, more practiced in the arts of love, was after Laura, and that by March 1864, John feared his rival might best him. The time had come to force the situation. As one person who heard the story secondhand remembered, John D. wanted to marry her. He went to her one day and proposed in a businesslike way, just like he would make a business proposition. She accepted him in the same businesslike way. One mentions the two of them smiling shyly with relief. Shortly afterward, the ascetic Rockefeller did something wholly out of character, spending a shocking $118 for a diamond engagement ring. The splurge, one suspects, had a point. He wished to telegraph to the Spellmans that he was no longer a callow country boy, but a rising young businessman who could support them in a style to which they were accustomed. After a discreet 6-month engagement on September 8, 1864, hard on the heels of Sherman's march into Atlanta, John D. Rockefeller, 25, married Laura Celestia Spellman, 24, in the living room of the Spellman house on Huron Street. It was a small private affair attended only by the two families. Like many things in Rockefeller's life, it was carried out in secrecy, and the Cleveland papers printed no notice of it. Very odd, given the Spellman's prominence. It is unlikely that Big Bill attended, and John might have worried that his absence would spark curiosity about him. Having established his financial wherewithal, Rockefeller now reverted to type and spent just $15.75 on the wedding ring, which was duly recorded in Ledger B under the rubric Sundry Expenses. In a denominational compromise, the pastors from Laura's Plymouth Congregational Church and John's Erie Street Baptist Mission Church jointly officiated, though Laura henceforth switched her allegiance to the Baptists. Refusing to deviate from routine, John worked the morning of his wedding day, visiting both his downtown office and a cooperage at the refinery. He had arranged a special luncheon for 26 employees, without disclosing at first the reason for the celebration. When the jovial bridegroom left for the wedding, he told the foreman facetiously, "Treat them well, but see that they work." With the Swiss precision that governed his life, Rockefeller allotted exactly 1 month, September 8th to October 8th, 1864, for a honeymoon that traced a conventional itinerary. The newlyweds started off at Niagara Falls, followed by a stay at the St. Lawrence Hall Hotel in Montreal, and the Summit House in Mount Washington, New Hampshire. On the way home, they stopped off at Oriad Collegiate Institute and met two new teachers, Sophia B. Packard and Harriet E. Giles. who would play important roles in their future. Prior to his honeymoon, Rockefeller's travels had been limited. The provincial young man in the tall silk hat exhibited voracious curiosity throughout the trip. While touring Niagara Falls, he peppered the guide with so many questions that the man grew distracted, ran the buggy into a ditch, and smashed a wheel. At another point, they met an old man in the roadway whom John so sedulously drained of local lore that the latter finally pleaded with weary resignation, "For God's sake, if you will go with me over to that barn yonder, I will start and tell you everything I ever knew." This was the same monotonously inquisitive young man who was known as the Sponge in the oil region. For the first 6 months of their marriage, John and Laura lived with Eliza at 33 Cheshire Street. Then they moved into a dignified 2-story brick house at 29 Cheshire Street. Surrounded by a white picket fence, the house had tall, graceful windows, but was disfigured by an ugly portico. Even though Rockefeller now operated and partially owned the largest refinery in Cleveland, he and Laura lived frugally without house servants. Rockefeller always cherished the chaste simplicity of this early period and preserved their first set of dishes, which stirred him to wistful reflections in later years. Thus, by the end of the Civil War, John D. Rockefeller had established the foundations of his personal and professional life and was set to capitalize on the extraordinary opportunities beckoning him in post-war America. From this point forward, there would be no zigzags or squandered energy, only a single-minded focus on objectives that would make him both the wonder and terror of American business. Chapter 6. The Poetry of the Age. The period after the Civil War was the most fertile in American history for schemers and dreamers,
Yes.
sharp-elbowed men and fast-talking hucksters, charlatans and swindlers. A perfect mania for patents and inventions swept America as everybody tinkered with some new contrivance. It was a time of bombastic rhetoric and outside.
1 second.
As always, during a protracted war, millions of people postponed their lives until the ghastly bloodshed was over. Then they turned to private life with newfound zeal. The sudden wealth of young businessmen such as Rockefeller fed envy among returning soldiers who wished to emulate their good fortune. The money fever was, in part, the reaction to a war that had appealed to both the worst and the best in the national character. For Lincoln's high-minded crusade had often been debased by profiteering contractors operating behind patriotic facades. For many in the North, the high drama of preserving the Union and emancipating the slaves had exhausted their capacity for altruism, leaving a residual contagion of greed. As the banker Thomas Mellon observed of these years of unfettered growth, it was such a period as seldom occurs and hardly ever more than once in anyone's lifetime. The period between 1863 and 1873 was one in which it was easy to grow rich. There was a steady increase in the value of property and commodities, and an active market all the time. One had only to buy anything and wait to sell at a profit. Sometimes it Chapter 6. The Poetry of the Age. The period after the Civil War was the most fertile in American history for schemers and dreamers, sharp-elbowed men and fast-talking hucksters, charlatans and swindlers. A perfect mania for patents and inventions swept America as everybody tinkered with some new contrivance. It was a time of bombastic rhetoric and outsized dreams. As always, during a protracted war, millions of people postponed their lives until the ghastly bloodshed was over. Then they turned to private life with newfound zeal. The sudden wealth of young businessmen such as Rockefeller fed envy among returning soldiers who wished to emulate their good fortune. The money fever was, in part, the reaction to a war that had appealed to both the worst and the best in the national character. For Lincoln's high-minded crusade had often been debased by profiteering contractors operating behind patriotic facades. For many in the North, the high drama of preserving the Union and emancipating the slaves had exhausted their capacity for altruism, leaving a residual contagion of greed. As the banker Thomas Mellon observed of these years of unfettered growth, it was such a period as seldom occurs and hardly ever more than once in anyone's lifetime. The period between 1863 and 1873 was one in which it was easy to grow rich. There was a steady increase in the value of property and commodities, and an active market all the time. One had only to buy anything and wait to sell at a profit. Sometimes, as in real estate for instance, at a very large profit in a short time. A new cult of opportunity sprang up, producing a generation of business leaders for whom work was the greatest adventure life afforded. As Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warner wrote in The Gilded Age, "To the young American, the paths to fortune are innumerable and all open. there is invitation in the air and success in all his wide horizon. Or, as one character in William Dean Howells's novel The Rise of Silas Lapham phrased it, there's no doubt that money is to the fore now. It is the romance, the poetry of our age. Self-made businessmen were the new demigods, and a copious self-help literature sermonized that young men who worked hard and saved could enter the millionaire's pantheon. This new industrial boom downgraded the power of the old gentry and rural elites, substituting a new species of self-made men, economic marauders too busy making money to be overly concerned with tradition. The era of the Great Barbecue, the felicitous name coined by literary historian Vernon Carrington, was dominated by arrogant, enterprising men in railroads, shipping, and stock manipulation. Jay Cooke, Commodore Vanderbilt, Jay Gould, Daniel Drew, Jim Fisk, and many others. The age was presided over by an inept president, General Ulysses S. Grant, a small-town businessman before the war who was enamored of the rich, no matter how frequently they tried to please him. The public was divided about these colossal developments. The appetite for gain fostered new fortunes and built up the industrial infrastructure, setting the stage for American industrial prominence, but it also unsettled people with a sense of something frightening, gigantic, and poorly understood that was drastically transforming their innocent country. The Civil War invited people to repudiate their pasts as they staked out new lives. As Grant phrased it in his memoirs, the war begot a spirit of independence and enterprise. The feeling now is that a youth must cut loose from his old surroundings to enable him to get up in the world. As people took unethical shortcuts to success, the universal race for riches threatened to overthrow existing moral systems and subvert the authority of church and state. The triumph of the North meant the ascendancy of urbanization, immigration, industrial capitalism, and wage labor over an agrarian Southern economy doomed to stagnate for decades. The war markedly accelerated the timetable of economic development, promoting the growth of factories, mills, and railroads. By stimulating technological innovation and standardized products, it ushered in a more regimented economy. The world of small farmers and businessmen began to fade, upstaged by a gargantuan new world of mass consumption and production. As railroad expansion gained momentum, populating the West and culminating in completion of the first transcontinental railroad in 1869, it spawned an accompanying mania in land deals, stock promotions, and mining developments. People rushed to exploit millions of acres of natural resources that could be economically brought to market for the first time. In short, by the end of the Civil War, the preconditions existed for an industrial economy of spectacular new proportions. Before the war, the federal government had only 20,000 employees and shied away from attempts to regulate business. Unlike Europe, America had no tradition of political absolutism or ecclesiastic privilege to quench entrepreneurial spirits. The weak, fragmented political system gave businessmen room to flourish. At the same time, America had the legal and administrative apparatus necessary to support modern industry. There was respect for private property and contracts. People could get limited corporate charters or file for bankruptcy. And bank credit, while not yet plentiful, was everywhere available in a highly fragmented banking system. In time, the government redefined the rules of the capitalist game to tame trusts and preserve competition. But as John D. Rockefeller said about building his fortune, the absence of clear-cut rules probably aided at first the creative vigor of the new industrial economy. Perhaps no industry so beguiled the Civil War veterans with promises of overnight wealth than the oil industry. In astonishing numbers, a ragtag group of demobilized soldiers, many still in uniform and carrying knapsacks and rifles, migrated to northwest Pennsylvania. The potential money to be made was irresistible, whether in drilling or in auxiliary services. People could charge 2 or 3 times as much as they dared to ask in the city. Ida Tarbell speculated that this little corner of Pennsylvania absorbed a larger portion of men probably than any other spot in the United States. There were lieutenants and captains and majors, even generals, scattered all over the field. They brought with them a military sense of organization and a bellicose competitive spirit, but they were eager for quick killings and betrayed little sense of how to fashion a stable, lasting business, providing an opening for the organization-minded Rockefeller. The war had stimulated growth in the use of kerosene by cutting off the supply of southern turpentine, which yielded a rival aluminum called camphene. The war had also disrupted the whaling industry and led to a doubling of whale oil prices. Moving into the vacuum, kerosene emerged as an economic staple and was primed for a furious post-war boom. This burning fluid extended the day in cities and removed much of the lonely darkness from rural life. The petroleum industry also furnished lubricants, to grease the wheels of heavy industry. Though the world oil industry was squeezed into western Pennsylvania, the repercussions were felt everywhere. In 1865, Congressman James Garfield alluded to the oil craze in a letter to a former staff officer. I have conversed on the general question of oil with a number of members who are in the business, for you know the fever has assailed Congress in no mild form. Oil, not cotton, is king now in the world of commerce. Soon, John D. Rockefeller would reign as the undisputed king of that world. In many ways, Rockefeller seemed a finely tuned instrument of the zeitgeist, the purest embodiment of the dynamic, acquisitive spirit of the post-war era. Like other Gilded Age moguls, he was shaped by his faith in economic progress, the beneficial application of science to industry, and America's destiny as an economic leader. He steeled himself to persevere, subordinating his every impulse to the profit motive, working to master unruly emotions, and striving for an almost Buddhist detachment from his own appetites and passions. I had a bad temper, Rockefeller said. I think it might be called an ugly temper when too far provoked. So he trained himself to control this temper and tried never to be guided by ego or pique. By the end of the Civil War, the pale, trim 26-year-old with the reddish-gold hair and side whiskers carried himself like a man of importance. No sooner had he formed a new firm with Sam Andrews than he was bent on expanding it. In December 1865, he and Andrews inaugurated a second refinery, the Standard Works, with brother William appointed its nominal head. The combined Excelsior and Standard Works confirmed Rockefeller as the leading Cleveland refiner at a time when the city ranked among the top refining centers. Photos of his first refineries show an unprepossessing cluster of buildings, scarcely bigger than sheds, spaced irregularly across a hillside. With hands clasped behind his back, Rockefeller paced these works, poking his head in everywhere, a perfectionist alert to the tiniest details. When he saw somebody attending to a neglected unswept corner, he smiled and said, "That's right, eternal vigilance." For foreman, he recruited a man named Ambrose McGregor, who was, in Rockefeller's description, a precise, exacting man, honest as the day, but perhaps not given to cultivating people. An imposing, bewhiskered figure, McGregor won Rockefeller's absolute trust on all technical matters. Since the refineries stood some distance from downtown, Rockefeller and McGregor often lunched at the boarding house of a Mrs. Jones. The two men in their oil-soaked boots regularly offended the nostrils of other diners and were exiled to the porch. As a self-made man in a new industry, Rockefeller wasn't stultified by precedent or tradition, which made it easier for him to innovate. He continued to value autonomy from outside suppliers. At first, he had paid small coopers up to $2.50 for white oak barrels, before he showed, in an early demonstration of economies of scale, that he could manufacture dry, tight casks more cheaply himself. Soon, his firm made thousands of blue-painted barrels daily for less than $1 per barrel. Other Cleveland coopers bought and shipped green timber to their shops, whereas Rockefeller had the oak sawed in the woods, then dried in kilns, reducing its weight and slicing transportation costs in half. And he continually extended the market for petroleum byproducts, selling benzene, paraffin, and petroleum jelly in addition to kerosene. In this early period, Rockefeller was a chronic warrior who labored under a great deal of self-imposed stress. Though not versed in the scientific side of refining, he often exercised a direct managerial role in the plant. With fluctuating market conditions, he sometimes needed to send shipments to New York with great dispatch, and personally rushed down to the railroad tracks to motivate his freight handlers. I shall never forget how hungry I was in those days. I stayed out of doors day and night. I ran up and down the tops of freight cars when necessary. I hurried up the boys. At the time, refiners were tormented by fears that the vapors might catch fire, sparking an uncontrollable conflagration. Fire had already taken many lives in the industry. Edwin Drake's well, for example, was destroyed by fire in the autumn of 1859. During the Civil War, there were so many spectacularly destructive blazes along Oil Creek that producers posted signs warning smokers will be shot. Mark Hanna, who later managed President McKinley's campaign, recalled how one morning in 1867 he woke up and discovered that his Cleveland refinery had burned to the ground, wiping out his investment, and such fears kept refiners on tenterhooks around the clock. I was always ready night and day for a fire alarm from the direction of our works, said Rockefeller. Then proceeded a dark cloud of smoke from the area, and then we dashed madly to the scene of the action. So we kept ourselves like the firemen, with their horses and hose carts always ready for immediate action. Such was the perpetual fire menace posed by the new industry that refineries were soon banned within the Cleveland city limits, hastening the growth of Kingsbury Run. In those years, oil tanks weren't hemmed in earthen banks as they later were, so if a fire started, it quickly engulfed all neighboring tanks in a flaming inferno. Before the automobile, nobody knew what to do with the light fraction of crude oil known as gasoline, and many refiners, under cover of dark, let this waste product run into the river. "We used to burn it for fuel in distilling the oil," said Rockefeller. "Thousands and hundreds of thousands of barrels of it floated down the creeks and rivers, and the ground was saturated with it in the constant effort to get rid of it. The noxious runoff made the Cuyahoga River so flammable that if steamboat captains shoveled glowing coals overboard, the water erupted in flames. Each time a black cloud billowed up in the sky, people assumed another refinery had exploded, and kerosene prices soared." At least in retrospect, Rockefeller sounded philosophic about this omnipresent danger. "In those days, when the fire bell rang, we would all go to the refinery and help put it out. When the fire was burning, I would have my pencil out, making plans for the rebuilding of our works." Even the dread of fire paled beside recurrent worries that the Pennsylvania oil wells would dry up, with no substitute in sight. As Rockefeller noted, "It was here today and there tomorrow, and none of us knew with any certainty about the continuance of the supply, without which these investments were valueless." Already by the late 1860s, stern prophecies were issued about the industry's impending demise. There were two types of oilmen: those who thought the sudden boom an insubstantial mirage and who cashed in their profits as soon as possible, and those, like Rockefeller, who saw petroleum as the basis of an enduring economic revolution. During the salutary nightly sermons he gave himself in bed, Rockefeller often meditated on the transience of earthly wealth, especially oil, and admonished himself, "You've got a fair fortune, you have good property now, but suppose the oil fields gave out." Yet the future of the oil business became an article of religious faith for him, as did the feeling that the Lord had blessed him and his enterprise. In late 1867, several days before Christmas, he just missed a train that ended up in a terrible wreck, killing many passengers. And Rockefeller at once wrote to SETI, "I do, and did when I learned that the first train left, regard the thing as the providence of God." Not yet the bête noire of oil producers, Rockefeller frequently donned his shabby oil suit and traveled to Franklin, Pennsylvania, where he kept an office that purchased oil, saving on the cost of middlemen. The oil fever was so infectious in the oil regions that these trips always silenced any fugitive doubts he might have entertained about the industry's survival. As one traveler reported after visiting Oil Creek in 1866, "Men think of oil, talk of oil, dream of oil. The smell and taste of oil predominate in all they eat and drink." These trips energized Rockefeller, who returned to Cleveland with renewed faith. As a friend recalled, when he came back, he would always have great tales to tell, and his eyes would snap as he would speak of his desires to succeed. In the 1860s, nobody knew if significant oil deposits existed outside the rugged terrain of northwest Pennsylvania, so the industry had immediately taken on global proportions. Within a year of Drake's discovery, his backers were marketing oil in London and Paris, and Europe emerged rapidly as the foremost market for American kerosene, importing hundreds of thousands of barrels yearly during the Civil War. Perhaps no other American industry had such an export outlook from its inception. By 1866, fully two-thirds of Cleveland kerosene was flowing overseas, most of it routed through New York, which became the export entrepot for oil. At once, Rockefeller saw that he had to look beyond American shores to soak up excess production. It seemed absolutely necessary to extend the market for oil by exporting to foreign countries, which required a large and most difficult development. To accomplish this, he dispatched Brother William to New York City in 1866 to launch the firm of Rockefeller and Company, which would oversee the exports of their Cleveland refineries. If William wasn't much younger than John, "My brother is 1 year, 1 month, and 8 days younger than I am," John specified with comic exactitude. He certainly had a younger brother's deference and mentality. Already settled by this time, William had gotten married in May 1864 to Myra Geraldine Goodsell, who came from a well-heeled Cleveland family with Yankee antecedents. The photos of William in his early 20s reveal a young man with thick mutton chop whiskers, clear eyes, and a broad, smooth forehead, who looks more placid and less driven than his elder brother. Throughout their lives, despite their antithetical temperaments, William was bluff and friendly and freer than John in morals and manners. The brothers remained warm companions and close colleagues. William was a natural salesman who easily charmed people. Even in Pennsylvania, he was a popular figure who swapped tales with oil producers while John held himself aloof. "William always judges everything by intuition and instinct," said John, tacitly contrasting his brother with himself. He doesn't act on analysis. But those instincts were sound, and while William took things seriously, he didn't puff them up into grand moral crusades the way his brother did. As a novice businessman, William had been precocious like his brother. After joining John as a bookkeeper at Hewitt and Tuttle, he was spirited away by a local miller and ended up at a produce commission house, making partner after just 1 year. By age 20, he was already earning $1,000 a year, much more than I got, noted John wryly, and winning his older brother's confidence. My brother was a young, active, and efficient and successful businessman. The quality that most endeared William to John was sheer dependability. In later years, John repeated the anecdote of how his brother, as a young bookkeeper, awoke in the night and realized that he had made an error in the bill of lading. He was so disturbed that he couldn't wait till morning to correct it, and marched down to the lakefront warehouse during the night so that the ship could sail on time with proper paperwork. In September 1865, William left the produce house of Hughes, Davis, and Rockefeller to join his brother's oil refining business, and when the Standard Works was organized that December, it bore the name of William Rockefeller and Company. Before long, John D. Rockefeller was cast by critics as the omnipotent wizard of the oil market, setting prices as the whim seized him. But by sending William to New York, he acknowledged that the export market decisively influenced oil prices. Whenever news of a Pennsylvania gusher reached New York, the French and German buyers, anticipating lower prices, simply stopped buying. This made them the ultimate arbiters of price. They sat there like a lot of vultures, said Rockefeller. They wouldn't buy until the price of refined had fallen very low on account of the flood of crude oil in the market. One of William's tasks in New York was to apprise the firm's buyers in the oil regions of sudden drops in export prices so that they could temporarily curtail crude oil purchases. When William arrived in New York, he set up unadorned offices at 181 Pearl Street, and the proximity to Wall Street was critical. To implement their audacious schemes, the Rockefellers needed massive capital, but encountered two problems that seemed insuperable. The elite Wall Street bankers preferred to finance railroads and government, and regarded oil refining as a risky, untested business, nothing short of outright gambling. Mindful of the extreme fire hazards and the specter of the oil running dry, only a few intrepid souls dared to wager on it. At the same time, John D.'s insatiable need for money outstripped the meager resources of Cleveland banks, forcing him to widen his search to New York, where he could secure credit at more advantageous rates. And my dear brother William, being located in the metropolis, where the opportunities were better for securing money, had upon him this financial burden, and he showed marked ability in keeping a steady nerve and presenting our case very well to the bankers. As a result of John's foresight in assigning him to New York, William's career became closely intertwined with that of Wall Street, to an uncomfortable extent from John's later perspective. As a gray eminence in the business world in his retirement, John D. betrayed a deep suspicion of financiers, boasted that he never borrowed, and was celebrated for his financial conservatism. Yet at this stage of his career, he turned inescapably to bankers. One can hardly recognize how difficult it was to get capital for active business enterprises at that time, he admitted. If Rockefeller ever came close to groveling, it was in his eternal appeals to bankers. In the beginning, we had to go to the banks, almost on our knees, to get money and credit. When dealing with the banks, he vacillated between caution and daring. He often went to bed worrying how he would repay his large volume of loans, then awoke in the morning refreshed by a night's sleep and determined to borrow even more. The Civil War introduced a new greenback currency and national banking system that generously stoked the post-war economy with credit. Many people grew rich with borrowed funds, creating a false flush of prosperity. Rockefeller was very much a product of this new credit-based society and owed a great deal to Truman Handy and other Cleveland bankers who identified him as a young businessman of exceptional promise. He cleverly projected the image of a rising star whom bankers spurned at their peril. One day, he ran into a banker, William Otis, who had allowed Rockefeller to borrow up to his credit limit. Some directors were now expressing misgivings. Could Rockefeller stop by to discuss the loans? I shall be very glad to demonstrate the strength of my credit at any time, replied Rockefeller. Next week I shall need more money. I would like to give my business to your bank. Soon I shall have a great deal of money to invest. Obliging but never fawning, he knew how to soothe jittery creditors. One of his cardinal rules was never to seem too eager to borrow. With amusement, he recalled how one day he was walking down the street, trying to figure out how to find an urgently needed $15,000 loan, when a local banker pulled up in a buggy and serendipitously asked, "You think you could use $50,000, Mr. Rockefeller?" Rockefeller, gifted with more than a touch of his father's showmanship, studied the man's face for a long time, then drawled, Well, can you give me 24 hours to think it over? By stalling, Rockefeller believed, he pinned down the deal on the most favorable terms. Aside from his reputation for exemplary character, especially among Baptist business executives, Rockefeller had several other traits that inspired passionate allegiance from bankers. He was a stickler for the truth in presenting facts, never fudged or equivocated in discussing problems, and promptly repaid loans. At numerous points in his early career, he was rescued by bankers from crises that might have capsized his business. At one bank, the directors balked at extending him further credit after he suffered a refinery fire and hadn't yet been compensated by insurers. Stepping into the breach, Director Stillman Witt asked the clerk to fetch his own strongbox and announced with a flourish, "Here, gentlemen, these young men are all okay, and if they want to borrow more money, I want to see this bank advance it without hesitation. And if you want more security, here it is. Take what you want." It is impossible to comprehend Rockefeller's breathtaking ascent without realizing that he always moved into battle backed by abundant cash. Whether riding out downturns or coasting on booms, he kept plentiful reserves and won many bidding contests simply because his war chest was deeper. Rockefeller vividly described the way that he had hastily enlisted the aid of bankers to snap up one refinery. It required many hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in cash. Securities would not answer. I received the message at about noon and had to get off on the 3 o'clock train. I drove from bank to bank, asking each president or cashier, whomever I could find first, to get ready for me all the funds he could possibly lay hands on. I told them I would be back to get the money later. I rounded up all of our banks in the city and made a second journey to get the money and kept going until I secured the necessary amount. With this, I was off on the 3 o'clock train and closed the transaction. To have orchestrated such a rapid campaign required a long relationship of trust with the banks. So adroitly did Rockefeller manage his unending quest for money that he became a director of a fire insurance company in 1866 and a director of the Ohio National Bank in 1868. By that point, he must have felt very sure of himself, even cocky, because he didn't bother to attend bank meetings and was ejected post-haste from one board. One is again impressed by the fantastic forward motion of his career, how quickly he evolved from humble supplicant to impatient businessman. Now in his late 20s, he had little time for fuddy-duddy directors and often dispensed with the niceties. As he said of the bank's board meetings, "I used to go at first, and there were some nice old gentlemen sitting stolidly about a table, discussing earnestly the problems offered by new departures in vault locks. It was all right in its way, but I was a busy man even then, and I really didn't have time for it. So they got rid of me speedily." For all his self-assurance, Rockefeller needed one associate who would share his daydreams, endorse his plans, and stiffen his resolve. That indispensable alter ego was Henry Morrison Flagler. 9 years older than Rockefeller, with roguish good looks, Flagler was a dashing figure with luminous blue eyes, smooth black hair, and a handlebar mustache. His clothes were of the most recent cut, an office messenger said admiringly. He carried himself with a confidence that was regal. He had a heavy black mustache and the most beautiful hair I had ever seen. Funny and voluble, brisk and energetic, Flagler was nevertheless reticent about his motives and background, and in time surpassed his tight-lipped younger partner in fending off public inquiries. Flagler's upbringing had some noticeable parallels to Rockefeller's. Born in Hopewell, New York in 1830, the son of an impecunious Presbyterian pastor, he grew up in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York before moving to Toledo, Ohio. In a previous marriage, his mother had been married to a Bellevue, Ohio doctor named David Harkness, who already had a son, Stephen, from his first marriage. They had a second son, Dan, before David Harkness died. Flagler's mother, Elizabeth, then married the Reverend Isaac Flagler. Evidently a man of courage and principle, Reverend Flagler created an uproar when he officiated over the marriage in Toledo of a young mulatto man to a white woman. Dropping out of school at 14, Henry made his way to Republic, Ohio, and worked in the small country store of Lamon Harkness, Dr. Harkness's younger brother. He later spun romantic tales of his first job, where he sold molasses and dry goods by day and slept in the drafty rear of the store at night. For special customers, Flagler would dip into a keg of brandy hidden upstairs. Becoming further entangled with his Harkness relatives, Henry married Lamon's daughter, the dark-eyed demure Mary, in 1853. Before the Civil War, Henry earned good money in Lamon's grain business in Bellevue, in the corn and wheat belt of Sandusky County, where he shipped much produce through Cleveland. John D. Rockefeller was a commission merchant in Cleveland, and I sent him a good many carloads of wheat, which he sold as my agent, he recalled. In a lucrative sideline, Flagler and his Harkness relatives took an interest in a whiskey distillery, which also provided an outlet for surplus grain. Like Rockefeller, Flagler was a prudish young man who never swore an oath stronger than thunder. As a teetotaler, Sunday school teacher, and minister's son, Flagler's liquor venture didn't square with his principles, though the profits evidently proved balm to his conscience. I had scruples about the business and gave it up, he confided, but not before I made $50,000 in Bellevue. Awash with cash, he built a stately Victorian mansion, the Gingerbread House, which was brightly illuminated with coal oil lamps. Among the visitors was John D. Rockefeller, then canvassing accounts for his partnership with Morris Clark. He was a bright and active young fellow, full of vim and push, said Rockefeller, as if Flagler were the younger of the two. During the Civil War, Flagler, like Rockefeller, hired a substitute. His firm was a major contractor for grain purchases by the Union Army, and in 1862, brimful of wartime profits, he cast about for a fresh opportunity. At this point, Flagler stumbled into the sole business blunder of his career when he took a sizable stake in a salt company in Saginaw, Michigan, and moved his family there. When the war ended, slashing demand for salt, his firm went bankrupt, the victim of a classic boom and bust cycle. Losing everything, he had to be bailed out by a giant loan from the Harkness family. At the end of 3 years, I had lost my little fortune and owed $50,000 to about 50,000 Irishmen who had been working in the salt factory, said Flagler. He had much occasion to ponder the contradictions of a market economy in which dynamic industries swiftly expand during prosperity, only to find themselves overextended during downturns. To cope with excess production, many Saginaw salt companies opted for cooperation over competition and joined a cartel arrangement to try to prop up salt prices, providing a precedent for Standard Oil. After his sobering reversal of fortune, Flagler entered a despondent period in which he sometimes skipped lunch to save money. Returning to Bellevue, he tried to market felt wool as well as a machine he had invented that would supposedly produce a perfect horseshoe. Deciding to try his luck in Cleveland, where Stephen V. Harkness had moved in 1866, he took a job selling grain with Rockefeller's ex-partner, Morris Clark, and by coincidence filled the post recently vacated by Rockefeller. Perhaps to tweet Clark, Rockefeller invited Flagler to rent desk space in his office suite in the Sexton block. As Flagler prospered, he settled his debts, bought a fine house on Euclid Avenue, and joined the First Presbyterian Church. As they strolled to and from work together, Flagler and Rockefeller must have soon discovered their remarkable affinity as businessmen. Chafing at his dependence on loans and wondering when he might deplete the capital of local banks, Rockefeller now scouted out large individual investors and was probably acutely aware of the wealth of Flagler's relatives. Through Flagler's introduction, Rockefeller solicited money from Stephen V. Harkness, by now one of Cleveland's richest men. A bearish man with thick, slightly unkempt hair, fluffy sideburns, and a walrus mustache, Harkness had capitalized on inside political information to make a fortune during the war. As an ally of U.S. Senator John Sherman of Ohio, he had received timely word in 1862 of an upcoming government move to levy a $2 tax on every gallon of malt and distilled liquor. Before the tax took effect, he busily stockpiled wine and whiskey, and even raided the deposits of a local bank he owned to pour more money into this operation. When the tax was enacted in July 1860,
Alright then, hello guys, today I'm going to do another Pico CTF challenge in the chat. command and write our own commands. So we see ID being run, which is similar to what you see in ID in the Linux command. So now that I know that this payload works, all we need to do is basically switch up, take out the ID command and write our own commands. So in my case, I'm gonna want to be able to type ls, like if I was in a terminal and see what's listed, and I see PyCache, app, flag, and requirements. Now I see flag, so that's the thing I want to be able to read out. So if I go back right here, injection. So we get this website right here, and we click enter. We see that we get features that we can mess around with. So one way to check for, I guess, SSTI or server-side template injection is simply by doing 7x7, and sometimes it doesn't print out. So what you want to do is wrap it around quotes, and that's how you usually test SSTI. Just I guess doing arithmetic. Something is double quoted. So might double quoted like this, and yeah, 49. So how do we solve this challenge? So one of the things that came up to me, because I've been doing challenges like this in the past, and I'm just gonna check real quickly to see if my voice is still recording. So one way to win these challenges is because I checked the source code to see if there was any hints on what we had to do, and no hints given. So I'm assuming it's remote code execution. So if I go over here on Python, I looked up PyGel SSTI and clicked on the very first article. But then on the very first article, it says server-side template injection with Ginger 2. So it goes, what is SSTI? It's a vulnerability that occurs when a server registers user input as template of some sort. So this can be abused to, I guess, run code or run code. So we go right here and it says we get this one. So I initially put the following payloads for remote code execution. We'll try to apply as many filter bypasses as I can. So he put up multiple remote code execution attempts. So for me, I obviously try the first one. So this one right here, which is using the Python built-in libraries to run the ID, which is basically a command. If I run this, we see ID being run, which is similar to what you see in ID in the Linux. Code execution. So if I go over here on Python, I looked up PyGel SSTI and clicked on the very first article. But then on the very first article, it says server-side template injection with Ginger 2. So it goes, what is SSTI? It's a vulnerability that occurs when a server registers user input as template of some sort. So this can be abused to, I guess, run code or run code. So we go right here and it says we get this one. So I initially put the following payloads for remote code execution. We'll try to apply as many filter bypasses as I can. So he put up multiple remote code execution attempts. So for me, I obviously try the first one. So this one right here, I did in the Linux command. So now that I know that this payload works, all we need to do is basically switch up, take out the ID command and write our own commands. So in my case, I'm gonna want to be able to type ls, like if I was in a terminal and see what's listed. And I see PyCache, app, flag, and requirements. Now I see a flag, so that's the thing I want to be able to read out. So if I go back right here, switch this to ID and then cat flag. We get the flag Pico CTFs.
One of the most effective ways to sell your products or services is by creating and promoting a sales funnel. Now, rather than using a generic website to sell your offering, a sales funnel focuses on stages, and each stage in your sales funnel is optimized to create a smooth customer experience and designed to drive purchases. Now, there are many sales funnel builders that you can choose from, but most are paid tools that can be quite confusing and costly for individuals new to launching a product or service offering. However, one of our favorite sales funnel builders that also offers a comprehensive free plan that we're going to talk about today is called System.io. Hey guys, Stuart here. Welcome along to another small business tutorial. Today I'm excited to share and navigate through the steps of how anyone can quickly and easily create a sales funnel for free using the sales funnel platform System.io. Okay, so before we go ahead and launch into System.io, consider subscribing if you haven't done so already, or if you're new to this channel, and that way you'll stay updated with actionable videos and tutorials designed to equip you with the skills, knowledge, and tools to help your small business thrive online. And with that having out of the way, let's go ahead and build a sales funnel using System.io so that you can sell your products or services online. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a sales funnel for free using System.io. Now, to arrive at System.io, simply head over to a browser and type in System.io, and that's going to take you here, or feel free to click the link in our description below this video. Now, once you arrive here, simply navigate over to enter your email, add your email address, then simply click on Get My Free Account. Then take your time to navigate through the process of signing up, and we'll meet you inside your account. Okay.
Yes!